let's start this conversation maybe by presenting yourself to the Continuum community, or anybody who is watching this video right now.
Okay, so I'm Robert Litman. I've been in Continuum since I think 1993 when I first met Emily, and I worked with her for 18 years. Not that I left Continuum, but the 18 years included teaching with her. After my first 3 years of meeting her, we began to teach together, and we taught together for 18 years. Developed a number of programs, a year-long program that we did in San Francisco for a couple of years called The Body in Question. It was an experimental program to get together with the same group of 65 people for three times in a year.
All right. Would you like to? Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, that was interesting. We were. Let me tell you a little story about how I met her.
Yeah.
And then, So in 1988, I got Rolfed, and kind of like, oh my God, I really like being in a body. I really didn't have much of experience of being in a body before that. And so I went to the Rolf Institute to become a movement teacher, not a Rolfer. And they didn't have a program at the time. So the teachers who were working there were teaching in Spain. So I went to Spain, and there I met two practitioners of other modalities. And when we were studying, they said, oh, this is very much like Continuum. You should meet Emily Conrad. Mm-hmm. Well, that was in 1988. 5 years later, I was teaching at a massage school in Tucson, Arizona, the Desert Institute of the Healing Arts. I was teaching movement and anatomy and physiology. Mm-hmm. And a friend put a flyer in my mailbox, and it said, Emily Conrad in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. And I had been thinking about her for 5 years and never got around to it. I'm going. So I got in my car with my wife, and we drove to Albuquerque, and it was a 3-day workshop, and sat down in front of her. And in 5 minutes, I said, okay, this is it. This is me for the rest of my life. I've been waiting for somebody to talk to me like this for all my life, to tell me the truth. Nobody had been actually telling me the truth. And here was the truth, and I could tell it in my body was true. And it wasn't that foreign to what my body already liked to do a little bit. So I started studying with her. So I went back to the school in Tucson, lightened my teacher load, and started to follow her around. But the one thing that I did say when I left the room in Albuquerque after 3 days, my wife picked me up. She didn't take the workshop. I said, two things happened. One is I said to Emily, I'd like to teach the work. And she said, oh, you're too tense. You'll have to let go of a lot of that tension before you can teach that. I told her that later. She didn't remember telling me that. But I walked out of the room, and I said to my wife, she picked me up, I said, I'll be teaching with her in 3 years. I declare that I will teach with her in 3 years. That was pretty bold of me, I think, at the time. 1 month short of 3 years, we went to another workshop outside of Albuquerque. This was a retreat. And I had been studying with her and going to LA and taking classes with her and going to other retreats. And at one of the breaks, she came up to me and said, would you like to start teaching with me? And that was just a 1 month under 3 years. And I said, wow. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. She said, well, how about we create this program in Berkeley called The Body in Question, where we'll explore and experiment with different possibilities. You can bring your anatomy and your experiential anatomy, and I'll bring Continuum. So we did. And the first group we had was 65 people, came from all over the country. They came 3 times within the year. And she would lay out stuff, and I would do she would talk about certain parts of the anatomy, and I would create with 65 bodies an anatomical structure, and we would actually move with that structure and see how that worked. It was quite fascinating.
Wow.
We would create microtubules, we would create blood vessels, we would just all kinds of stuff. And I would bring videos and slides, because that was where my expertise was. I wasn't really yet, adept in being a continuum teacher. Mm-hmm. But over time, we just kept working together. We became really good friends. I did a lot of research for her. I was an anatomy teacher and a scientist, basically, and a biologist. Mm-hmm. So she would be interested in something, and I'd say, I'll research it for you.
It sounds like a great match, yeah.
Huh?
It sounds like a great match, you two meeting and
yeah, it was. We were both from New York. We both, raised in a very similar. We were 10 years apart in age. And ironically, I was in the advertising business at the same time that she was modeling in New York as a fashion model, and I was in fashion advertising. We may have crossed paths. I don't know. I may have seen her images in Women's Wear Daily. I don't know, but we were in the same vicinity. As was later on Susan. Susan was from Tucson, Arizona, and so she and I lived in the same town for a while. So that was also, and I didn't meet her till much later. So we did that for a while, and I collaborated with her. And then in 2006, so in 1999 or 2000, I can't remember, we made teachers. And I became a teacher. My first job was in Tenerife, off the coast of Africa. And in 2005, 4, 6, we said, we kept, since I was in the bodywork field, we kept talking about that most people who are in the bodywork field have two complaints. One is that people come back and they want to be fixed for the same thing over and over again. So they come in for a massage, my back hurts, great, fix my back. Come next week, fix my back. So there was no education for the people who were coming to Continuum, and they were just, what can we do with Continuum? And that we can give people some instructions what to do so they can build on what my massage and do some things with themselves. So it has developed to a different place the next time I work. And so it's progressive. We're starting to work with it and maybe make more change. So that was her focus. The other focus was the fact Emily noticed that, as with other modalities, that bodies were not necessarily prepared to receive the work. That they'd come in off the street and they just like lie down, and you'd have to kind of warm the body up. And we thought, well, what if we also offered the idea of using Continuum before you even got your hands on to get a body into a receptive state so that it can receive the work more fulfillingly. And so we said, yeah, that would be a great idea. Since I came from that field too, I was working in a massage school. And so in 2006, we offered the first one. And it became the Wellsprings Practitioners Program, the Continuum Wellsprings Practitioner Program. And its design was to work with people who were specifically licensed in a massage practice or a bodywork practice. So they weren't looking for a Continuum license or certification. They already had their practice. And they would come and they would learn how to use Continuum for those two reasons: how to integrate prepare a body for work, and how to integrate the work that they deliver. And then they would get an authorization to use Continuum in their private practice. It wasn't to be used in a studio or in classes. It was strictly for their private practice. So like I say, in 2006, we did the first one, and we had a really good turnout. I don't remember, we had 18 people maybe. And we did it for a couple of years in a row, maybe 3, maybe 4 years in a row every summer. It was an 18-day program. People came for 18 straight days. And then the attendance fell off, and we started to put it into every other year, and that kept it going pretty well. And the most important thing that came out of that practice of the program was, yes, people learned a lot of skill. They did. But also they spent 18 days in Continuum. And they dove for 18 straight days in Continuum. So what the real end result was that they knew more about their own bodies by the end of 18 days and how to apply some things for certain reasons. But knowing more and having a greater internal intelligence, they knew now when they put their hands on a little bit more what they were looking for and how to transmit that fluid body or that fluid feeling that they had into another body, as well as use their fluids as sort of a receptor device. Device is not the word, it was receptive and resonant field inside your own body, so that you could actually resonate to somebody else's fluid and see where it may be stuck, where it may not be moving, where it needs a little help, where it needs sound, where it needs movement. And that's the way it feels to me, that when I put my hands on, I'm really using my fluid to check into somebody else's fluid. And Emily had worked on me, and that's what I felt from her. Just that she was just opening up the resonant field of our fluids and working with that.
Yeah, I have one question about with curiosity. There's been some films, about Emily's work where we can see in the early years working with different people and paralyzed people or people with spinal cord injuries. And did she bring that that part also in the early days of the Wellspring? Was it also? Yeah.
No, absolutely. She did. She was very interested in that always, and always brought that in, because the work of Continuum, the micro movements and the tuning in, the way she tuned in, that it was good across the board. But that's where the proof came, that you could see the change in people who were paralyzed. And she was also concerned about other diseases that were, like cancer and stuff. How could we possibly work with that to create more coherence, to help the body be more skilled at healing itself and bringing wholeness back and bringing health to the surface, coming from the belief that somewhere in the body health already exists, and having it be more explicated and brought to the surface for the whole system. Yeah. So we had some protocols for things, but people didn't really take it so much on for the protocols, I think, as much as now I know how to work with people. Now I know how to speak about and transmit my internal sense of continuum into another body and with another body.
Right,
mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great. We had a great time together.
Yeah. And so it seems like also like different people from different type of background could actually come to this program and get really tuned in the continuum realm. And did you were they like new people, let's say, like people who didn't really know continuum at that time, and they heard about it, and there was this long program that was available for them to study, or how did it work?
Well, Emily, of course, was incredibly charismatic. So she was traveling a lot around the country, and she'd be in classes, and she would just, she had an eye for who could take the work in really well, and who could transmit it, and who needed it. So she would just point them out and say, you need to come to Wellsprings. Okay. And they would. So she was always filling the class from being on the road. And what happened was, you're right, it expanded. I remember we had somebody who was in theology school at Harvard. We had singers start to come in. We had psychotherapists start to come in. Right. So the field widened. As long as people were engaged in their own practice and not looking for a continuum certificate, we started to widen the field. To include anybody who was working with other people who felt like it could be useful in their practice, or actually who Emily thought would be a great adjunct to their practice. Right. So she really kept filling the room by telling people they needed to do it, and they would do it. They would follow her instructions. Yeah.
So by now the program continues.
Yes, it was. It was both an ironic and sad thing. Always spaced out. Emily died in 2012, I think, or 2013. And the year before that, we said we were getting older, and she was in her 80s, and I was in my 70s. And we said, well, what are we going to do if one of us gets sick? Who's going to replace us? We keep the program going. And both of us immediately said Gail Rosewood. Both his long-term relationships with Gail. Gail has studied with Dr. Ralph. Great background in body work, and so that's what happened. And of course, Emily did get sick, and Gail and I continued to take it over. And when Emily died, she bequeathed it to me, since we did develop the program together. So it's mine separately from any other organization. And Gail and I continue to teach it, and we'll teach it again in 2021.
Great. I took that program with you too.
You did take it. It was a pleasure to have you in the class. That was a big class too. That one. Yeah. That was the class when Emily had already got. I think she died at that point, right? We knew she wasn't going to be there, but she had died then. Yeah. And everybody still came. We really appreciated that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So to go back into your own journey with Continuum. As a man, there are not many men in this community, so I'm really curious to hear a little bit how there are not many men in the somatic community at first, but you come from an anatomical and biological background, so that's kind of probably more mainstream there. But so how what's your thought about maybe the lack of men in this community, and how was for you what was your curiosity as a man in this work?
Well, I think it's a good question. Primarily, I am a relationship-oriented person. So if I could say that a mantra for me was, if it doesn't work in my relationships, it's not, it doesn't work. It's not applicable in relationship. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So what happened in the first few days, like after that Albuquerque workshop, this is a funny story. I'm a little embarrassed about it, but it's a funny story. I came home and I did that dive for 6 months, same dive. Mm-hmm. And I go, oh my God, I feel something in my back I never felt before. Oh my God, I felt something here. But more importantly, but that was important, but I would come out of the room, and I was married at the time, and I would say, oh, I just want you to know how much I love you. I really just want you to know how much I love you, from after a dive. Mm-hmm. And she would say, great, go back in and do some more Continuum. Because really, up until that point, I was pretty argumentative. I was pretty principled. I knew what was right and my principles, and let's have a relationship based on my principles. Mm-hmm. And that had already cost me 2 marriages. Okay. And this one was not going so well at that particular point either. And so I began to open my heart, and I began to kind of use Continuum as in the fluidity that it was, and in resonance to my partner. Mm-hmm. And see that when she would say something, I didn't have to go to whether it was right or wrong. I would check out with my body. Does that feel right for my body? And I would go, yeah, that's fine. Great, let's go with that. Or if it didn't feel right for my body, I go, no, that doesn't quite feel right. So the relationship shifted into conversations through resonance. Right. And so it began that, this is really applicable. This really is working for me. And then the same thing happened with all the other teachers that I was starting to study with. I mean, the field of being together in such a fluid medium, and without a whole lot of holding on to being principled or being a particular man in a particular way and having a particular persona, all that stuff was falling away. And I was just really liking myself more and more in touch with myself. And I thought, God almighty, I think every man on the planet should do this work, because it would change how we relate to each other greatly, and especially women. So I didn't have any trouble staying with it. I loved being on the floor. I loved spending days on the floor. It didn't hinder me in any way that I needed something more aggressive to do. It was plenty satisfying to me. And when I was studying with Susan at the same time with Emily, she added so much emotional stuff to it for me that I could weave those two and developed emotionally in a way I hadn't. I was going to say before, I was severely traumatized as a child, so that all that behavior and relationship was coming as a defense mechanism for having been traumatized. And so Emily's conversation, you have to let go of a lot of tension. That's what was happening, that the tension and the trauma and the feelings of the trauma, and actually releasing long-held sadnesses and griefs and angers that I never really had a chance to express before. So my body was softening up, getting more fluid, and losing its tension. So that was like a godsend for me. It's just a good godsend.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you really experienced like a somatic transformation. Like nowadays there are a lot of the topic of changing the world and changing oneself through somatics and the somatic approaches. So that feels pretty relevant in what you describe.
It was a complete transformation. There was one time that I said to Emily, I was sort of not doing well financially, and I had spent all my inheritance, and I was complaining. She said, "Really? You're complaining? Look at the life you just got from spending your money with me." I said, "Yes, I'll keep my mouth shut." Well, and one of the, I really loved that she was open to my contributions. That she really, the other part of it was that she valued me. Right. And I don't, besides my wife, I never really had felt that anybody valued me. And so I kept willing to learn to speak more of what I knew and what I learned and how I saw them weave, because I really was a biologist before that. And then I came across the Buteyko breathing method. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that in continuing classes, a lot of people had trouble breathing. And so as did my daughter. So I took that class and went to New Zealand and studied for a year to bring that back to Continuum, to bring the breath information back to Continuum. Yeah. And Emily was very open to that, and I did. And so she, her focus on breath escalated after I brought that back to Continuum. Yeah. So I was glad to have made those kind of contributions to it.
Yes. And I think it's very important for our community to know that the resources from breath comes from you.
Yeah.
You know, in what's being teaching now, or and how it will develop further you know.
That's
Um,
very moving to me. I can feel myself being moved by that. To be, you know, what looks like success right here in the moment is not about success. It's really about how much the work got transferred and transmitted out into the world, which I do hear a lot of feedback from that from people who've taken my classes in the past. That stuff still stays with me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now so there's been a lot of changes in this community is around Continuum. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel at the moment Continuum and your breath work, of course, you know, like, please speak both, because we are living in a very particular time now, and
Yeah,
I
we
think
are.
that this time is really a time to be what we learn, and to really, you know, be not so much about speaking of things, but more like really being what we've learned with this practice, and you know what it means to be in a body and to be on this planet, and how to be in relationship with the environment and with what's going on. And so how do you see this work can contribute or help people in the next coming months, or maybe the next coming years?
Well, I like where Continuum's going. I mean, I value the teachers. I'm, you know, a member of the Continuum Teachers Association, and those are a lot of my old-time friends. I think how we are with ourselves, I guess I'll go right to the point. You know, one of the things that we learned in Continuum was one of the primary teachings that Emily would always ask was, how many times have you died?
Yeah.
And what she meant by that, of course, was how many of your identities have you seen through and realized they're not who you are? There's something more essential to what your nature is. And so in this particular time, that mutability and that ability to adapt to change is really important. I mean, I see that at the level of our nervous systems and our level of our immune systems.
Right.
That, you know, people do adapt, people do grow. The planet's changed many times. There's many die-offs. Some of us will figure out how to negotiate our particular DNA with the virus's DNA. And you know, some of the authors we have valued, the man who wrote On the Water's Edge had written a book about viruses drive evolution.
Right.
So we're in an evolutionary time. Will I survive that evolutionary time? I don't really know. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. I do know from the mandate of how many times have you died, I'm more comfortable with the idea that I may die. Mm-hmm. From the fact of the breath work, which means that every time I take a breath and I take a breath out, I do not know if I will get another breath. Each breath is that fractal of my greater life. Mm-hmm. So I've spent a lot of time getting comfortable with the idea of death through Continuum, not through an idea of spiritual practice or hearing about how to do that, but actually being in my fluid body through Continuum and knowing that this is a transient form. And I'll either stay in it or I won't. And I don't want to suffer, particularly if I get sick. But if I have to let my life go, I think I will do it in a much calmer way than if I hadn't done Continuum. So I think that's one of its biggest gifts, to recognize our essential formlessness about it. Bonnie Gintis, the Continuum teacher, used an osteopathic term that I really like and repeat, that what we see about ourselves is only a momentary aspect of spatially ordered metabolic activity. There's no there. So I think that's the way it can help us. And I think one of the couple of other really big lessons that I've learned that I really count on was the idea of being able to move from my superficial self to my deeper self, to my deeper layers, to go through the layers. That the layering has been really important to me. I never knew that I had any depths to me when I was a child. Mm-hmm. And so learning that, I'm in a deeper place inside of myself. There's different information in here. Mm-hmm. I know how to travel to find out more information about myself and what's going on. So I know how to travel through layers to get to some essential. Because just before Emily died, she said to me on her deathbed there, Robert, the kernel of attention is really small. That was my last lesson. Kernel of attention is really small. So I've really refined my attention to go for the really smallest little bits of information that are wanting to arise. And the other is, see, I lost track of myself there. We were talking about two things. One was the layers, and what was the question? Can you repeat the question for me? Can you remember the question?
Yeah, like how do you see this work will evolve basically, and how relevant it is to be, sometimes we learn things and we learn so many things, in a year, and some practice continuum or different things. But I'm feeling that right now, particularly this practice and being in a body is very relevant and important for being able to adapt and to just be in this reality and not kind of dissociate from it into panic or into whatever. There are big changes, and we are living one that is really, we are living a really big one now that is just, it's happening now. So we can really feel that. But Emily talked, since I met her, when I met her, this was already there. Like, how are we going to unfold as a species, and how we're going to evolve in order to really land in our body and find an harmonious way to relate with one another, but with the larger context of the planet.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say that I think really is relevant to that. We hear it out in the world that everything starts in the body and it starts at home. But one of the biggest things, coming from a traumatic background and watching the years that I was with Emily, and even before that, but all the things that I did before that, which were numerous, that how long it took me to unfold some of the more deeper pains and wounds in me, and how sometimes I would touch them and then I would leave them for a year. They got too scary and I'd have to come back a year later. So over time, I started to take a look at that process, and I began to notice that what I was developing was a compassion for myself, to take the time it needed to unfold and to find the resource. And I developed self-compassion. And so that just led me to the next place, that before I can be compassionate for others, I have to be compassionate for myself. So true compassion really started for me by feeling it for myself, and recognizing that it's not up to me in any way to determine for somebody else their speed of development. Right. That all I can do is be with them and sit with them with where they are in that particular moment, and what they're looking at, and what they're searching for, and what they're trying to find, which is basically the unconditioned self, the essential nature of who they are, without the wounds, without the baggage that they're carrying emotionally that hasn't been processed, and where their light wants to shine, what contribution they want to make. So just clearing away the field to have more of the essential nature, and we don't know where that's going to be. Emily's was always the question, what does it mean to be a human? And this is what we're trying to find out. This is just another cycle back. I think it's devastating what the virus is doing, but it's almost miraculous to see one of the smallest organisms on the planet totally change the planet within 2 months. Right. Clean the air, clean the oceans, just take everything out of condition so that things get cleaned up. It's like we have no idea who we are or what's going on here.
I really appreciate that you're mentioning that, because I think it's really seeing the other side of the of the phenomenon. So it's really great to also acknowledge that.
Yeah, and we're foolish to think we can't be extinct. It's just the mitochondria that process our oxygen to create energy. They are, bacteria that figured out how to survive when oxygen was a pollutant. 98% of the bacteria died in the world when oxygen came around, and 2% figured out how to do it, and that's what we have inside of ourselves. So, I just read the other day, and it just struck me, it's funny, because this is the way Emily and I used to work. We used to read something in biology and think, well, okay, let's wait a couple of years now. They'll verify what we knew intuitively. And they just discovered a bacteria, a little animal that does not, and it's small, it's microscopic, that does not breathe oxygen. And I thought to myself, here's the next species beginning its arrival on the planet when we run out of oxygen. But just we have no idea. So that's what I liked about Continuum, the open field of we have no idea. Just be with your experience, and that's all you can do.
Do you have a sense of being at the edge of what's known and unknown, and how is your intuition going with that? How it's been working for you, like being in this conversation with Emily, but also with your own experiences and your own path, let's say. Not so many people can actually experience what you just told,
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you see yourself there at this cliff, maybe, at this edge of more consciousness or more awareness or something that
it's all about heart.
Yeah.
It's all about heart.
Mm-hmm.
It feels that way to me, and heart informs the cognitive. The other place that as a man, the other place that Continuum, but that's not true for just men. The other place that Continuum really interested me was how do I apply it in my functional life, how I walk around the world, and how it works in my athletic interest, which is swimming. I've been swimming for 60 years, and
Mm-hmm.
I apply Continuum in my swimming, and it really opens me up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And always after a regular dive or any other dive, it's a further development of my heart, my ability to love unconditionally, and notice when I don't, and notice when I do, and notice what the judgments and opinions I put up immediately when I meet some people and go, still, yeah, okay, I notice those, and we both still have a heart. So I think the development of Continuum is to continue to open up the heart space, so that we can have greater love, because I think that's where we're being pushed now.
Wow.
Because as much in the virus out in the world, I'm talking to more people on the street than I ever did before. Yes, we're staying further away from each other, but we are talking to each other, which normally we just would pass right by each other. So something is happening at the same time. Something else is happening. We just don't know. We have no idea. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Yeah.
Just to talk a little bit more about Emily, there's in my own personal development, when I'm thinking about a theory, a context on which to put my teaching,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm really on a big track with it. I hear her. I feel her come in and say, yeah, this is it. You're on it now, Robert. You're on it now. And other times, no, but other times, you're on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, their field is still closely around me. I feel I miss her a great deal. I have periods where it comes back to me even after this time where I could just sit down and weep, because it's just, I miss the conversations, the camaraderie, the way we could have a conversation now about what's going on,
right?
And
right.
what we could really do, because I do think we can, innovate and protect ourselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate you mentioned that, because I think quite few people can feel that, and to me, like, one of the learning of Continuum is actually to reach out to a larger perception and a larger field, which without becoming esoteric becomes quite present and natural and just part of what we are, most
Mm-hmm.
probably.
Mm-hmm. Most probably. And, fortunately, I think we can actually translate and transmit Continuum online. So I think we can continue to spread it, and it may be even spread bigger because it can be online and people can have more easily access without having to travel to it. So there's another possibility of development right there.
Yes. Right.
I'll tell a funny story, though, because you asked this question earlier, and I thought to answer it this way, but I did some all men's classes at Mount Madonna for a number of years, and the group was getting smaller, and but I got a $5,000 scholarship to give away, and so the group was very large, and they put us in a room, maybe 10 by 10, because they thought it would be a small group, and I said, I can't teach in here. I got 30 men and teaching instead. I can't do that. They said, well, we don't have any rooms. All we have is a basketball court. I said, I'll take it. Give me the basketball court. So we would go down, we'd teach class on this basketball court, And when there was a break, man, those guys were up playing basketball. You know, and then we get back down to the floor, we move for a couple of hours, and boom, they'd be playing basketball. So I thought to myself, yeah, that's a nice way to teach Continuum. You know, have a lot more for men. You know, some people, doesn't have to be men. That's just, you know, ridiculous. But those who want to have a class where it has activity that is lively. And, you know, some people put in dance in their continuing classes. That's one way to do it. But even, I just always remember that very fondly, that the guys just got out and played basketball.
It's fantastic. And, you know, like actually that brings me a question about, you know, the form of Continuum, because you've been witnessing the form of Continuum changing over the years. And, you know, I'm hearing also from different teachers, and also from, you know, my own teaching, that the form is also changing, and maybe there may be a multiple ways, like, you know, the basket place and Continuum that could emerge as well from that. So what's your I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I do. I mean, that was Emily's mandate, whether, you know, we followed it or not. She said, you know, swallow the teacher. That was the thing. That was swallow the teacher. And I remember for years in first teaching, and I wanted to teach just like her, you know, repeat her words,
right?
You know, oh, I know what I'm doing. And it's just like, it just kept ringing false.
Right.
And I had a friend who was another teacher, and we talked about it one day, and she said, oh, when I go to a new Continuum class, I have to do that dive like I did the first time for 6 months until I know it inside out in my body, so that I could teach it from my body.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it gets innovated. You take a piece in, and a lot of new sounds coming back, and you see what emerges from your body. You see how it fits. And Emily's mandate was also very important before she died. The single one question you want to ask when you're innovating something is how it's affecting the fluid system, and is it enhancing the fluid system's potential fluidity and innovation, adaptability and mutability. If it doesn't do that, it's not Continuum. Right. Continuum's focus is on the fluid field. And that's how you know if the innovation is appropriate. Does it feel like it enhances that? Wow. So I think as all of teachers get out there and they try things and get down in the dive, and a new sound emerges out of their body and they feel that incredible impact into their system, great, bring it forward. Yeah. That's all Emily did. You know, she'd come in the room, got a new sound for you, got a new breath for you. Where'd you get that? Well, it just came out, right? Okay, let's go for it. Let's try it. Yeah. She did a workshop once, one form. Here's a form probably not many people have done. She wanted to have a workshop in LA and an experiment one weekend. She said, please come for the weekend. I don't know if it was Friday night and Saturday and Sunday, but it was at least 2 days. So we got in the room, we're all set, you know, we're going to learn all kinds of new stuff. So she says, here, listen to this sound. And she makes the sound of, oh. We go, oh, great. She said, that's it. That's it. That's all I'm teaching. Go make that sound for 2 days. And we did. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you know, the hours spent in being aggravated about, I came all this way just for that, you know. But by the end of 2 days, oh my God, it was phenomenal. And what everybody got out of it was just forward. So, you know, that didn't happen too often. But yes, a lot of change in form over the years. I wasn't around in the early years when she had a band come in, and when they worked out in the desert and stuff. But, you know, when I came, there was mostly breaths and dancing sometimes in the workshops, music always, and then that left and sound became dominant, and music went away. And then we went to the dark and doing workshops in the dark and longer periods of time. You know. Just evolving based on what she thought was needed at the time, and we followed her. She was our teacher, so we followed her. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for this precision. I'm very curious to see how, you know, what will be the next, let's say, layers of the work.
Yeah. Yeah, it is always innovating. That's my experience. Every time I go in, it's like, oh, whoa, okay. But it's all in that wall of context about the fluid system and about the personal development and inner development and body development and being in a body, not coping, but resonating with the world and making appropriate action, not being too attached to any one outcome.
Right.
That's opened such a huge field for exploration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I love talking about it. It's very, very, very warming to me to have this conversation with you.
Yes. And one last question. We don't want to have the interview too long, so people, get really can actually have the time to watch the full interview. Actually, now I guess most of people can have the time finally to watch long.
Right. It's true.
But so, what is your experience of sound? You mentioned this experiment with Emily with the O sound. But what is your personal relationship to sound, and how do you feel that that's such a key ingredient or to the practices, but also to maybe the evolution of Continuum? There is one,
Well, I see sound when I make it. It's interdependent with my levels of fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
So the more rigid I am, the less pleasing the sound is to me.
Right.
So I know that I'm in charge of how that sound's coming out. So I can work with my body and so see, of course, after a dive and after a layer, it sounds really different. So I've gotten used to the fact that the sound indicates to me just a little bit of the state of my own fluidity and my ability to make the sound.
Right.
I've always, but with the sounds, interested in the aesthetic of the sound. Does it sound pleasing? I want it to sound pleasing. It's coming out of my body. I want it to, something I want to make, and it's up to me to do that. And the other piece that sound came in was to decrease density, to create movement, to put sound in as a penetrating force, to separate molecular phenomenon and create some rooms for more interaction and more space and more fluidity. So I like playing with sound that way. I like a baseline of breath. I like a baseline of sound. And then I like a baseline to see what breath sounds like, again, what feels like after I've made the sound. How does my breath move after I've made the sound? And both of those things, sound and breath, help me feel the limits of my body, determine the size and the shape and the place that the vibration and the sound is currently playing in. And so having a sense of the shape of things also gives me a chance to play with the wave motion inside of that shape. So it elucidates form and shape for me, and densities and fluidities, and a skill to also carry my attention. So a sound becomes an implement that my attention goes to, and so my attention is getting carried in where the sound goes. So it takes me in as well. A very, very important part of it.
Beautiful. And one last little question about do you feel in the way we sound in the continuum that it goes well with what you learn about breath and breathing, and or are there little things we may adjust or be aware when we are practicing?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask me. You asked the right person for that question. After I took the breathing work, I began to really pay attention to how people were making sounds and how they were sort of replicating Emily's sound in a particular way that they thought. But they would make sound repetitively, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Sound, oh, take a deep breath, oh, take a deep breath, oh. And I thought, whoa, this has got to stop. Because what they're doing is they're using the residual air up, then they're gasping for air for the next breath. It needs to be more conscious.
Right. That
you make the sound, feel where you feel it, let your breath restore itself to where you feel like you're breathing in an easy way again. Make sure you're attuning to the territory that the sound woke up. Right. As you make the sound, so that new place has had an impact from the sound becomes part of the resonant body that's now making the new sound. So the sound's not going to sound the same the next time because you got more of your body, including in the resonant field of the sound. So you have to take time to let that happen and let breath come back to normal and then make another side. Otherwise, you start to hyperventilate and you're really you're creating a different kind of awareness, and that's not one that I think is just conscious.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for, because I think that's
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yay. This is very good.
Yeah. So I think we'll stop here for today. And
Sure.
Thank you so much, Robert. Can you give us the info where we can reach you and how we can reach you, and if you have any things coming up? Hopefully the video will come out really soon. So if there are anything you want to announce now, please.
Well, the best way to find me is either through Wellsprings of Continuum, the website Wellsprings of Continuum, or Continuum Wellsprings. You can find it there. Continuum Teachers Association, I have a listing there. And my own website, the other website is thebreathablebody.com. And it's always a contact number. You can catch me there. Everything's changing. I had a whole East Coast trip planned starting in April for workshops in New York and New Jersey, and I don't think any of that's going to happen. So I don't know what's happening right now. But I am offering online breathing classes, particularly because I'm a particular practitioner. I have some stuff on my YouTube channel under my name. This is because that's what feels like is being called forth from me right now, is my education around breathing, to help people really understand how to pay attention so they really actually know what to do for themselves to make themselves stronger, as well as when they can feel like, and know really surely when it's deteriorating, have more consciousness around that too. So any of those places.
Great. We will put all the link in on the videos so people can find you easily.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Robert, thank you so much. So
well, thank you so much too. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. All right. Adios then.